Welcome back to Sonoma Raceway, where the fun continues as we get our next group action coming up. And I'm delighted to be joined once again in the booth by another couple of enthusiast drivers, I would argue, and definitely people who understand this sport and enjoy it. Cameron Healy and Bert Skidmore, first and foremost, welcome. I guess, Bert, start with you. What do you love about this? Why is this, for everybody involved, a thing that literally consumes you?
It's a great sport. It's wonderful to take care of these cars. It can be challenging keeping these great cars on the track. One of our customers, Nick Colonna, with this monster Corvette, number 16 out there, has a 427 in it that has about 650 horsepower, and keeping the thing together is kind of a challenge.
When you say customers, so what is your
So we have
Intrepid
Racing that takes care of vintage race cars. We do a fair amount of Ferrari service in Reno.
And that's prepping them?
Prepping them, taking care of them, bringing them to the track, trackside service, doing everything we need to do where the drivers just show up, arrive and drive. That's what they do. And
Cameron, your interest or your beginnings of this and why you follow it?
Excuse me?
Why do you follow this as much?
Why do I follow this? Yeah, I kind of caught the sports car bug age about 15 in the Porsche world, and that's where I've resided ever since. I've spent the last 32 years historic racing with a number of different vintage Porsche cars, and I've raced and rallied in 11 different countries, but I'm West Coast based, and Sonoma Raceway, Laguna Seca, I'd call kind of my home tracks, as well as Seattle. But I'm, I would be like what Bert has a whole support company. I would be like one of his clients, but I do my own Porsche thing. But yeah, so I come at it from an enthusiast. It's not a business; it's a passion. But it can, I'm 72 years old and able to spend even more time doing it. So I love it.
You mentioned Nick Colonna in that Chevrolet Corvette from 1967. We've got a real bunch of different cars here from what is our SCCA production class from 1963 to 1969. So this really is that smorgasbord of, now we introduce the Japanese cars to it, from Datsun, as well as obviously the obvious things like the Porsche 911s, Ford Mustangs. We've got a few Shelby Cobras out there, and still the European influence with Alfa and with Lotus, and so many others.
But I'd keep my eye on that Lotus 26R of, is it Hiroshima? I'd keep my eye on that Lotus 26R. He's going to be a tough one to beat. Great drivers, Rob Walton in that 250 LM. I'm not sure who's in the red 250 LM, but he's way up front. This should be a good race.
Right, yeah, and and I know Gunnar Jeanette's out there in the.
He's in the 250 LM,
that's
the
true,
red
yeah,
one.
Yeah, some great.
He's going to be tough.
Great drivers out there, and I mean, this is a great era of sports car racing. It's really when it came into its own in the U.S. There were more U.S. cars, mostly big bore, being developed, along with the numerous European marks that were still being exported, and so it was often a competition between big bore and lots of power and might against the light and nimble smaller bore of the European cars. Ferrari's kind of in the middle of that, but generally that was kind of the racing intrigue in the 60s.
I want to be careful how I say this, but in this period, this mid-60s period, there was a sort of there was a rivalry, but there was a sort of, we can do that better here in the States.
Yeah.
And the Europeans came over, and I don't think they were really looking to dominate or looking to show off per se. It's not the British way, it's often not the European way. They had their own scene, they did their own thing, but the Americans kind of got excited by it and went, well, why don't you do this, and why don't we try, let's throw some more power at it, and we'll let suspension hold that, well, we can go to Bob and get that. So very much like, as Enzo called us, the garagistas of Formula One in Britain, where the likes of Colin Chapman were trying lightweight things, and Lola came along, and so on and so forth. That rivalry, that competition, really became something that really kind of ignited this whole thing to develop, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that Carroll Shelby was an interesting example where he took a British chassis and body and said, why not put a Ford V8 in there and see what it would do, and that became legendary. So, there was a lot of ways to do it, but it kind of came out of that garagista mentality, really.
Yeah, and I think the crescendo or the fulfillment of that, because even at Le Mans to those days, the arrogance, and I'll say it, I'm a European, towards the Americans, about racing at Le Mans until '66, and it took that sort of 1, 2, 3 to go, what? How dare you? Right. And we know how to build a motor car, and we kind of invented the Ford, so, get back.
It was a great era.
It was a good era. And I think it kind of leveled the playing field that has gone on, and the rivalry, certainly at Le Mans, that goes on to this day. And last year, Ford come back, and, and so on and so forth. I think, and they're going into the future now with IMSA and around the world with the Ford Mustang. We're seeing some of that here this weekend.
And historically, a number of years ago at an event, they had a mechanic for Briggs Cunningham when he took 3 Corvettes over to Le Mans in 1960, and he told the story of when they arrived, there was an issue with transport, and so they just drove the car from wherever the port was to Le Mans through all these towns, and the French had just never seen these big bore American loud rumbling through these towns. He said it was just an incredible experience. It was like the Americans were back again, after the liberation during World War II. But he said it was amazing taking to Le Mans those cars. And
I also think the film industry, here we are on the West Coast, not far from LA, but the films that were out in the '60s and the way that the Porsche became James Dean notoriety, as it were. Elvis got in on the scene, but the movies that we saw in Europe in those times were of Corvettes, of these big muscle cars, of Trans Am. And I think that also spurred on a lot of Europeans to fall in love with the big American muscle cars.
Yeah. I think there has been a European intrigue about these cars all along. Yeah.
I want to talk about things like the 1966 Bizzarini 5300 GT Strada, an interesting sort of, not addition, but an interesting part of the history here. I don't know what your knowledge of that, but that's the Italian company that was only around a few years. But in the time, Giotto Bizzarini in 1964 produced, 200 of these coupes and these F300 Stradas before closing in '69. So they became rare by the sheer fact that they were only made for so many years.
We had a couple of them that we took care of for Nick Colonna and a guy named Brent Backman. One of the cars had Le Mans history, which was a really cool car to drive and take care of. That was really a good era.
What's the hard? We took a look at the Lotus 26, which is pretty much not bog standard, but we've seen it a million times before. But when you're an Intrepid putting together or preparing a car to go racing, what is the hard part, or is there, whether it's parts, whether it's ingenuity, or you've got to stick to get into an event like this, it's got to be pure, or as pure as damn it. What in preparation is the tough part?
Sometimes parts are getting harder and harder to get. A lot of stuff has to be made. We got to stay on top of magnafluxing or crack checking parts. We'd rather catch them crack before they break, which is a big deal. Crack checking suspension components and staying on top of it so that they're good, safe cars.
While we're watching this, guys, we're watching a Lotus chase down this Ferrari 250 LM Berlinetta GT driven by Gunnar Jeanette. And by the way, I'm not going to tell you because I actually do know, but because I know what it was sold for. But that Lotus is giving it a run for its money, which is the classic story of what we're talking about kind of thing, to European cars, albeit. But that Ferrari, it's not priceless, but it's not far off, and the owner must be kind of breathing heavily watching Gunnar put it through its paces. But as he says, that's why he's brought in here to do that. That's what they want to see, and that's the essence of this event.
The cars have gotten very valuable. If they get damaged, they're still the same amount to fix.
Right.
It doesn't change that it's a multi-million-dollar car, that it costs multi-million dollars to fix it. All the stuff is repairable.
Here comes the Lotus.
Yeah, the Lotus 26R is taking them around the outside at the carousel. And a drag race down into turn 7. So he's going to be the guy to watch. He's going to be coming up on Rob Walton now.
And he in a Ferrari 250 LM
Yeah,
himself,
exactly. Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
They got him. Ooh, so
got
close.
him.
The 250 LMs, when they first came out, was a 3-liter engine, and it was classified underpowered, and it went immediately to a 275, which is a 3.3 liter. Great cars. We used to take care of one for a guy named Lucelier. Wonderful cars, wonderful cars.
This is great, guys. I mean, to anybody who thinks they're watching an exhibition, think again. Watch his hands on that number 7. That is just superb.
That little Lotus probably has around 200 horsepower. The 250 LM probably has 350.
Yeah.
But the Lotus is a light little car, very nimble. Hiroshi is a really good driver. He's won a lot of races, here in the States, and I'm sure in Europe also. Great race.
Ferrari should get a bit of grunt down this main straight, little kink here, past our commentary position, and away he goes. But up the hill, he might lose out to, like you say, that horsepower there.
He's got some long legs in that LM.
This is great.
Yeah. Great spot.
Wonderful to see. We're watching Group 4, and we're talking to some very learned fellows. Cameron Healy, what are you driving?
I'm driving 2 cars. In Group 3, it's a Cooper. It's a hybrid, of course. It's a Cooper chassis, homemade aluminum body with a Porsche 356 4-cylinder engine. It's a mid-engine car, and it's 1953. Weighs 1,000 pounds, and has little skinny tires, but it's very nimble.
But let me ask you a question I've been itching to ask somebody like you. What makes, I mean, obviously with these Ferraris, that is obvious. There's not many of them made. That makes them rare. They're Ferraris full stop, so they're expensive cars. And then put a date on them, which is, late 50s, early 60s, and then suddenly you can see where the price point is. But there are cars that you perhaps, when you see them at auctions or Christie's or whatever, that you think, why is that so valuable? What makes certain cars more valuable than others?
Oh, probably the stories, like the 250 GTO, for Le Mans, were
it's the last Ferrari to win, wasn't it?
Yeah, other than last year,
Well, yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
That's written everywhere until last year.
Yeah, but when they say, we're going to have to build 100 of these cars to be classified as a Grand Touring Omologato,
yep.
And they didn't have the 100 cars done yet, and they promised that they would, and they got up to 39 cars, and I think won the race. And then Enzo Ferrari says we're going to stop production. So there's only 39 GTOs out there. That's what makes them valuable, and they did a great job, in their racing in the years.
Yeah, and then you'll see as we get to our Formula One classes, cars that were originally driven by a Niki Lauda, by a Jackie Stewart, who of course were world champions, and so that puts value on them immediately. And even to this day, they've got huge pedigree in some of the historic events, so they've continued to be driven hard by some greats as well, because it's not everybody who can drive one of these Formula One.
And I think there's, in the collecting world, there's pedigree and there's all these things that goes into it, but I think when you get into the Ferrari GTO and the values, they're almost in the art collecting level. I mean, they go into this kind of stratospheric band of value that is pretty amazing. Yeah.
Well, we've got a cracking race on here. Fitzsimon, or is it Simon or Simon? Anyway, either way, that Lotus is flying, and he's ahead of Rob Walton and Gunnar Jeanette in their 2 Ferraris. And as you can see, the 2 Ferraris trying to hang on to him with 3 laps to go, and they're gonna feel pretty miffed if they don't beat him, because I know that there is a lot of pride out online there. But Horatio, look at the wheel, look at his hands on the wheel. He is absolutely
on that thing.
On it.
Yeah, great driving.
And Sonoma, a great track for this sort of thing. It's a good driver's track, isn't it?
It would be a different story at Le Mans with those 3 cars.
Yeah. Well, once you hit the Mulsanne, the original
stretch their legs a little bit.
They got some long legs.
Get their own, yeah.
Yeah.
This is going to be a good battle for second and third between these 2 as well, because they know each other well. They've raced each other many times before, and they are on similar cars. Oh, he got a little oversteer. And that again, Gunnar, sideways in this car that's worth millions. And now he comes side by side with the other Ferrari and takes him into the first corner. Beautifully done. And meanwhile, that little Lotus is now getting into the traffic of Corvettes and the like.
I think he might have been being held up by those 250 LMs, and you can see he's pulling away now.
Which is ironic, but as you say, with the horsepower difference.
Yep.
Yeah, great viewing spot here.
Guys, I've had a few people in here, and I always ask them to sort of take their regular hat off. You have a great opportunity over the weekend. Do you get a chance, because you're working hard, you're driving and preparing, but do you get a chance to look at some of the other stuff and kind of, is there anything you want to look at this weekend or you'd like to point the audience to?
Well, I think this is a great event that Jeff O'Neill is doing because there is so much to look at compared to a normal race. You know, he's brought in all these different elements, including the McLaren Formula One team and Lando Norris, who's their lead driver.
The man.
Yeah, so there's there's so many different things that distract yourself with from race driving. And yesterday, with 2 cars entered, I had 4 sessions, so there wasn't as much time. But now there's 1 session a day per entry, today and tomorrow. So for the drivers, there's more time to wander around and check things out. But yeah, this reminds me of going to Goodwood Festival Speed, where there's so many levels of the automotive world represented.
Yeah, and a chance to relax and enjoy the wines here of Sonoma, as well as, and I like the fact that they've got the hypercars, the modern McLarens, and they've got a chance for you to see not just the history of motor racing, but also the future as well. Got an electric boat out there somewhere.
I saw that.
Here we go,
White
final
flag.
lap.
White flag.
So 1 more lap, yeah.
And yourself, I mean, I guess for Intrepid it's business to business, i.e. B2B, and you're also preparing the cars, but do you get to enjoy it?
I do. It's a lot of fun. I used to drive competitively, and I've kind of call myself semi-retired now, but we've had some great runs. We went to the Le Mans Classic and finished second overall. Bobby Rahal was my co-driver one year. We set quick time. And it was fun. We've had a great time. I've had the pleasure of driving these 250 LMs and GTOs and Testarossas and really cool cars. One of the best cars I've ever driven is the John Player Special Lotus 79. That was Mauro Andretti's championship-winning car. I got to drive it for a couple years. That car is going up for auction in Abu Dhabi at the F1 race here in a few weeks.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be bringing in big money. I mean, millions and millions.
Whoa, look at the Lotus. It's off in the dirt and grass. Oh. Wow.
These guys are trying. These guys are trying.
Like I said, I am absolutely enthused every time I see these sorts of historic cars being pushed to the very limit, if not over in that case, while he hangs on to the lead. This is not processional by any means.
Gunner's trying. He's really trying.
He is trying everything. Like I said, if I know Gunner, he's going to try and take that checkered flag before the little Lotus, just to save the pride. It's Collier's, I think he represents, or that's where it's collected, where the collector is, isn't it?
I think I'd put my money on the Lotus.
Yep. At this stage, it's going to be a real last chance hotel up the inside, but he's not going to do it. He might just, if he tucks himself in here, get the grunt to the line. But the way the Lotus has been pedaling, there he is. Nice little adjustment there. Gunner gets sideways a bit. But here comes to the line the checkered flag, and it is the Lotus that wins. Well done.
That's great.
Horatio Fitzsimon takes it in the 1964 Lotus 26R. Gunner Jeanette in the Ferrari 250 LM Berlinetta GT. And Rob Walton taking 3rd place.
That's brilliant.
Brilliant. 250.
Yeah, that's great. I ran into Scott George from the Revs Institute, who owns the red LM, and he said we weren't coming, but I got the call from Jeff O'Neill. Said we got to have your car, so they shipped it all the way out here and brought Gunner in to drive it, and those are such beautiful cars.
Well, guys, thank you for coming in. Go ahead. Well, you lost
that was awesome. That was a good race.
Yeah, it was. Well, I hope that's enthused you to get out there and do what you do and enjoy it. But thank you for coming. You're welcome here in the booth to tell us more. I could talk to you guys all day long, and I'm hoping to have more and many of you here in the booth. But you are part of the Velocity Invitational here at Sonoma Raceway. It's a look back in history, and it's been fabulous, and we've only just begun.